So maybe if you could start by maybe introducing yourself and maybe, talking maybe also a little bit how you got into migration, like why is that something that you follow?
Well, I've been practicing in the area of migration and asylum seekers for quite a few years now. So it's basically my only area of law that I practice in, you know.
Okay. For any particular reason, or just because you found it interested since the beginning?
I suppose it's a combination of reasons. I find it very interesting, number one. And number two, I like to try and help people who I believe are not provided with the rights that they should have under the law.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so on this, obviously talking about the EU-Turkey deal that was signed in, I guess, March 2016, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about...
Well, the most surprising thing about the EU-Turkey deal, in my view, is that it's technically got nothing to do with the EU. I'm sure you're aware of that, are you? As far as the EU are concerned, it's not their agreement. So they don't publish that very well and don't let the public know that. They say, have you read the judgment?
I did, yeah, I did.
Yeah, well, you can see the logic of the EU, that it wasn't the EU itself that entered into this agreement. It was rather the individual member states. But I think that's just a mechanism to avoid European law.
But maybe if you could explain, like how did you get to it? Like how did you get to actually defend someone on a deal like this? Like, did you get to know the refugee that you were representing? Like, how was that? How did that play out?
I was representing quite a few people who were in Greece. I was referred to them and asked to assist. So I did, and I met various people, including the three applicants of the three cases in that the judgment was the subject of. So I've met them and took instructions, and we decided to attack the EU-Turkey agreement.
Okay, and were you at that point in Greece?
I went to Greece to meet them, yeah.
Got it, okay. And were they in a refugee camp at that point?
Some of them were, and some of them weren't.
Okay.
Some of them were kind of living out on the street, and some of them were in refugee camps.
Okay, but they did cross the Mediterranean?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. So you were saying you met them, and then, like, how did that... Like, what was the process until you actually said, like, okay, like the route is putting the EU in court?
Not unlike any other legal case, really. They had complaints which I thought were legitimate, and I basically felt that the EU-Turkey agreement was unlawful, as I still do. And we decided to attack it in what appeared to be the only appropriate way, which was to go to the General Court of the CJEU in Luxembourg. And then we were
go on.
And then we were met with the defence that it wasn't an EU agreement. And that's how we ultimately lost it after appealing, etc. And it was argued in the judgment, it was found we lost for some other reasons as well, but the fundamental reason was that it wasn't an EU agreement, you know. And that's where the whole problem lies, in my view. Because there appears to be no other practical way of challenging that agreement if it's not an EU agreement. But I'm a little bit slow to go beyond what's in the judgment itself, because that leads me into getting my opinions about things that might be the subject of future litigation, which I don't want to damage. There may be other cases going down the tracks, you know.
Okay, so you're still, so the case is still under review now? Like, did you appeal the decision?
Oh yes, the judgment you have read is the. Did you read the judgment? There's two judgments. You know that.
So I read. So actually, Louisa sent me. So she basically managed to get that out, right, a few weeks ago. And so what I read. I'm actually putting this now in front of me. So I read the plea of inadmissibility of the.
Yeah.
But that was the 11th of July, 2016. Is that one? Is that the one?
No, I don't think so.
So is
later than that.
Oh, okay. So
there was a challenge to the agreement lodged in the General Court of the CJEU. The General Court held that it was an inadmissible application because the EU were not a party to that agreement, that it had nothing to do with the EU. We appealed the decision on admissibility to the CJEU itself, and the CJEU basically confirmed the decision of the General Court.
And now you challenged it again?
Pardon me?
And you challenged it again?
It was a two-stage process, and we exhausted both of those stages. So there's currently no further appeal pending.
Okay. So the case is pretty much finished now, no?
As of now, yes.
Okay. And maybe if we can go back, I think something that I was also trying to understand, like, and maybe you can explain that further. Like, what was the basis of your case? Like, what did you think was unlawful, and why did you make the case? Why did you think that there was something unlawful in the, well, they call it statement, but the deal really?
I suppose fundamentally because Turkey is not a party to is only a limited party to the Geneva Convention, and the idea of sending back asylum seekers to Turkey in those circumstances, in my view, was, and in my view is, contrary to the terms of the Geneva Convention.
And why?
Because Turkey is not a safe country as that term is defined in European law, because Turkey does not provide the full protections in the Geneva Convention to nationals of countries who are not European nationals. It's quite complicated, but it boils down to whether Turkey can be treated as a safe country in European law, and I don't believe that it can. And of course, that leads to the practical conditions under which people are kept, are held, are dealt with, if and when they are returned to Turkey. It leaves open the question and possibility that Turkey may return them to other countries, perhaps even their countries of origin, without a proper assessment of their claims under the conditions of the Geneva Convention. I'm not saying there's anything wrong necessarily with Turkey in a legal sense. They haven't fully entered into the Geneva Convention, and that's their entitlement. They don't have to. But the real difficulty is whether it's lawful to return people under European law to Turkey when Turkey is not a party to the Geneva Convention.
And what the court says is that, well,
The court says that they have no jurisdiction to determine this question because the agreement, the EU-Turquia agreement, is not an EU agreement. And obviously, if it is true that it is not an EU agreement, then the European Court of Justice have no jurisdiction. And that brings us back to whether an agreement made in or immediately after meetings of the European Council constitute an agreement by the EU or not. And that's what was held. That's why it was deemed to be inadmissible, because basically the court said that the Commission argued that it was not a sorry, I'm mixing up Commission and Council. European Council,
the Council
said that it was not a European agreement, simple as that. So the court had no jurisdiction, and the court agreed. So when the court has no jurisdiction to deal with something, it simply can't deal with it, and that's the conclusion they came to. But in my view, it opens the door to Greece in particular, because Greece is the country immediately affected, for Greece and other European countries to send people to Turkey under that agreement, which is not a European agreement, not a European Union agreement, to a country that isn't a safe country. It's actually a very simple argument.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is very simple. Also, like the document that I was reading is kind of very to the point, right? But so they also say that on the council meeting prior to the statement of the agreement between Turkey and well, I don't know, but between Turkey and, they say, the member states, I would say, it was not on the agenda.
The heads of government, the heads of government of the member states, they make a distinction between the EU and all the prime ministers of the EU sitting together and making a decision. And I think that's a very artificial distinction. But it has the effect of denying the European Parliament any scrutiny of the agreement. If, for instance, if the agreement was in fact made, or if another similar agreement, we must accept, as of now, the judgment of the court that it wasn't an EU agreement, reluctantly accept it. But if the EU made a similar agreement to the EU-Turkey agreement, that would have to be debated in the European Parliament and go through all the safeguarding mechanisms in European law, and its operation would have to be subject to the jurisdiction of the CJEU, so that when the agreement is reached otherwise, in this case by what some would say is a very artificial distinction between the EU itself and the leaders of the governments of all the member states acting together, the result is that the Parliament and the court have no jurisdiction, and it gets around what would normally be safeguarding procedures of the European legal system. And the question of whether, if this agreement had been, for argument's sake, a European agreement, a EU agreement, then would it have been lawful? And I suggest that it might not have been lawful, because the definition of a safe country in European asylum law would not include Turkey, because of the way that Turkey operates its limited obligations under the Geneva Convention.
That's quite Kafkaesque, right?
What?
It's a bit Kafka.
Absolutely Kafkaesque. It is, yes.
And so one thing they say is that the deal with Turkey was not on the agenda of the council meeting prior to this statement, right?
Say that again?
So they say on the plea of inadmissibility that I was reading that one of the reasons why they say this is not a EU deal is that on the council meeting prior to the statement, there was nothing related to the agreement or to Turkey, or even I think to migration on the agenda of the meeting.
Yes, because they said it wasn't a council meeting. It just happened to take place immediately after the council meeting.
Got it. And so if it's not a deal of the European Union, how come they basically state that so basically Turkey would get every refugee or person that is a irregular migrant that would be found crossing the Mediterranean from Turkey to Greece would be sent back to Turkey, and then for each Syrian that would go to Turkey, one would come to Europe on a cap of 72,000. Well, so many things. But then on the other side, Europe would offer a few things, right? And would offer 6 billion euros to Turkey to basically do that.
Yes, but bear in mind that technically speaking, it's not Europe offering the 6 billion or 3 billion or whatever it is. It's the member states acting together, but not as the EU, according to what the court says.
Okay. So basically Portugal and Germany and France and Greece would, and others obviously would go and find this money and then send it individually to Turkey and not really the EU as a body.
Perhaps, well, you see, the mechanics of how it works is probably supervised and operated by the EU. Probably, I'm not quite sure. But technically, the monies that support this operation and more come from the countries individually rather than from the EU.
Got it.
But it's a very artificial distinction in a lot of people's minds.
Okay. But then if you go back to the 18th of March 2016 to the press area of the European Council website, and if you go there,
yes, it all appears very, very much as if it is an EU agreement.
Yeah. So they say today the members of the European Council met with Turkey.
You see, stop there. The members of the European Council. That is not saying the European Council. It says the members of the European Council. Now that's a very artificial distinction, and it's hard to imagine the man on the street realizing that this isn't an EU agreement. And you've just said there, look what it says on the website. But we said that in the court case, and we said a lot more, that impressions were given, etc., etc. And I'd say a lot of people are under the illusion that the EU-Turkey agreement is an EU agreement, although the EU will say it is not.
Okay. And then when you say, also on the 8th point of that press release, it says, the EU and Turkey reconfirmed their commitment to re-energize the accession process as set out in their joint statement of the 29th of November 2015. Meaning that they would restart the talks of Turkey possibly joining the European Union, right?
Yep.
But
Yep,
how come the members of the European Council, but not really the European Council, start negotiations of Europe joining the European Union? That's also kind of weird, right?
Well, now hold on a minute now. The last bit you read me there, the EU and Turkey reaffirm, what did that say?
The statement of the 29th of November 2015.
Yes, yeah. What was it you just quoted to me there?
You mean the whole sentence?
No, just the last bit you said. The EU and Turkey reaffirm or something, was it?
Reconfirm their commitment to re-energize
Go before that. What words come before that?
the EU and Turkey.
Okay. You've got there the EU and Turkey, not the members of the EU. Okay? So there is a distinction there. Now, as I say, it's an artificial distinction. And why, if this agreement was made by the individual member states rather than by the EU, could those individual member states be able to issue a press release which says what the EU's intention is? But those are all questions that were dealt with by the court, and arguments were made exactly in regard to that kind of thing and other things in the statements and publications, but they were all rejected.